I'm Lacey Sanford. I'm an HLA counselor here. I want to introduce the rest of my co-laborers.
Hi.
This is Rebecca Sardella.
Hi. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Rebecca Sardella, and I'm a senior high counselor, and I have a junior in high school that we've homeschooled throughout our entire educational journey.
And I'm Jennifer Post. I'm the magic voice because they can't see me. Jennifer Post, I'm also a high school counselor. I'm at the end of my journey. I have my sixth that is a junior in high school, so I'm at the end of the tunnel, the long tunnel.
Yeah, and I have a senior this year, so I am in the planning processes of seeing him through, and then I also have a 7th grader and I have a freshman, so we've got some milestone years going on. So when we were talking about what we wanted to, what needs that we saw coming into HLA as far as questions with homeschoolers, one of the biggest ones is, what curriculum do I use? And that is such a loaded question. And so we want to be able to kind of give you guys some information about some of the different styles of homeschooling. And when you're in the homeschooling arena, we have kind of like a homeschooling lingo. And I'm going to try to familiarize yourself with some of these different styles on your handout so that when you are looking for curriculum, you're not so overwhelmed on looking at the whole big picture of all that's out there. You could kind of tailor it to fit what you and your child needs. And so I think you guys have heard that from the opening workshops when Margie talked and Lonnie talked and stuff. There's so many different ways to homeschool. We're raising different children, even within the same family, and not everything is going to work for the same child. And so that's what we're going to hope today is to kind of familiarize yourself with some of the different styles. The handout is called Flavors, and I want you guys to think of them that way. Because if I were to ask you guys, what is your favorite ice cream flavor? We're all going to have a different flavor. I like chocolate personally. Jennifer, what flavor do you like the best of your ice cream flavor?
Chocolate mint.
Chocolate mint. Rebecca?
I'm a vanilla girl.
Okay, there we go. So you see, we all have different answers on that. And so it's the same with homeschooling curriculum. You can ask your best friend even, what's your favorite curriculum? And they're going to give you something. They're going to be super passionate about it. A lot of us get loyal to the homeschooling curriculum that we use. And then we go out and we buy that curriculum because we think it's going to work the same for our own child. And sometimes we waste a lot of resources and a lot of money doing it that way. I can tell you I have went to the conferences, I've bought the things at the booths, I've come home and I've had buyer's remorse or buyer's guilt because we just didn't use it or it didn't work for us and we kind of gave it up mid-year. So I wanted to tell you, first of all, the definition of curriculum, to kind of get you guys thinking a little bit differently. All courses given in a school, college, or a particular course of study, but it's the content and the plan for instruction. So when we think of curriculum, we generally think books, textbooks, things like that, but it's made up of the instructional resources or the methods and the assessments needed to help students develop critical skills and knowledge. So curriculum does not have to even be bought. I think it was Margie that said that she can homeschool with a library card and her Bible. It can be an outdoor classroom. It can be going to the places in your town that you're close to and learning about history in that way, and Rebecca's going to touch on that a little bit. So when you think of the word curriculum, don't let curriculum cramp your style. Let's think not just books. Let's think of the course, the methods that we're going to use, the resources that we're going to use to help our children. So what are the different styles of homeschooling? If we're not wanting the curriculum to cramp our style, the first question when we're talking about curriculum is, well, what is my style of homeschooling? And why is this important in choosing curriculum? Well, just like our different flavors of ice cream, we're all going to like something a little bit different, and it's okay. We have different styles that we're going to be drawn to based on what we want our homeschool to look like, what we want our family life to look like. So in the homeschooling world, we have a whole nother language. Who's brand new to homeschooling? Like brand new. Okay, have you heard all of these different things and you're like, whoa, wait, what does classical mean? What does Charlotte Mason mean? What does Montessori and traditional unit studies, online schooling, and eclectic homeschooling? Because when you ask those questions on those pages, if you're on social media and you're on those homeschooling groups, you're going to have a whole lot of different things coming at you. And there's going to be a lot of different styles that people are talking about. So let's familiarize ourselves a little bit. If you, I think it's on our handout, we've got the traditional method. That one, if you follow along, that one is going to be what you're used to seeing in the school setting. It's usually going to have a workbook and a textbook, and you're going to read the information and you're going to answer questions. Usually they're typical multiple choice or true and false short answers. The goal of traditional homeschooling is to remember the facts until the test, and it's the know part of the style. That's a fine style to have. If that is your style, then you are in that traditional realm. Classical, okay, classical, that sounds intimidating and kind of scary. We're going to talk a little bit about that with Jennifer's experience. So a lot of people do programs like Classical Conversations or Veritas Press and things like that. Those are the classical curriculums, and they're based on what's called the trivium. That's your grammar stage, which is the 6 to 10. That's when your kids are like they're wanting to know. They're asking a ton of questions, and they're just wanting to soak it in, absorb as much as they can. Why is the sky blue, Mom? Why do grasshoppers hop? All the questions that they're going to ask, that's the grammar stage. And then they get into where they want to talk more than they listen, and that's the dialectic stage. And they also want to ask, well, okay, the sky is blue. Why is the sky blue? They want to know. They want to get a little bit deeper. They want to understand the logic behind just the facts. And then they get into the rhetoric stage, which is really when they can start forming their own ideas in the thinking stage of why they know what they know. That's classical education. Charlotte Mason is the next popular flavor of homeschooling. That's living books instead of textbooks. That's going to be narration instead of questions, a wide variety of subjects, and a broad curriculum. A lot of Charlotte Masoners, they focus a lot on like the nature studies and just the living books and things like that. And then unit studies. I think Margie was talking about how her kids really dove into certain subjects. Lots of hands-on projects, and it's usually all around a common theme. So when they were talking about learning about birds, you can write about birds, draw birds, visit a bird, sanctuary, things like that. And then we have unschooling, which sounds really scary in the homeschool language world. Like, what does unschooling mean, and how do I make that fit on a transcript if that's what my child is and my teaching style is? So there's not a set curriculum or agenda. It's child directed, or usually it's interest-led learning. And Rebecca is going to talk a little bit more about that and how she makes that work for history. So you don't have to read those boring textbooks. Sometimes you can do the unschooling approach with even something as history. And so I just want to put that out there before I start talking a little bit deeper on the different styles that is out there. So when we get that question, what's the best curriculum to use for my child, we really kind of first need to know what is your style. The second page of that handout, and you guys can kind of go through that yourself, is to kind of answer these questions about yourself and put the T or the N beside it and see where you kind of fall.
And your style may change.
It
exactly likely right. will change.
That is right.
As you go through your homeschooling journey. You may start out very structured because that's where you feel safe. That's what you're familiar with. So you may start out in a really traditional school setting, a traditional homeschool setting. And as you get more experience and as you become more comfortable and your kids become more comfortable with this new process of learning, more often than not, we see folks slowly sliding over to what some folks call unschooling. I like to call it interest-led learning. And so that's where a lot of homeschoolers wind up, is in interest-led learning, even if you think, that'll never be me.
That is a good point. So let me, we're going to do some confession time here. So when I first started homeschooling, I homeschooled in first grade. He's now a senior. I wanted it to look very traditional. Okay, so that's what I felt comfortable with. It has evolved from the traditional look and curriculum. It went into the Charlotte Mason because all of my friends were doing that, and I wanted to go on fun-filled trips, and I wanted to do nature studies, and I wanted them to have a nature journal, and my boys were not digging that at all. That was not then. That's not what they wanted. And then it has evolved since then, now that they're in high school. And most of the time, I'm an eclectic blend of things because my son does really well with online school. He does great at dual enrollment classes. He likes hearing, like his professor will tell about history, and he's passionate about history, and so he likes that auditory learning from things that are online and lectures and stuff like that. My middle son is totally opposite. He'll tear down an engine and rebuild an engine. He's very hands-on, so he's definitely interest-led learning. They're all so different. And then my last born is a check boxer. He's very type A for a last born child, but he likes to have his daily schedule. He likes to get it done before noon, and he is checking his boxes off. So they're all so different, and they do evolve, and you have to kind of like ebb and flow with your, not only your teaching style, but your child's learning style. So there is not one perfect curriculum.
That's right.
Not even one.
No, not a single one. Except for the Bible.
That's true.
The Bible is a perfect source of teaching.
That's
but
right.
Other than that, there's not a perfect curriculum.
There's not a perfect curriculum. And so comparison is the thief of joy. That's something I've always kept in my mind because I look at other homeschool families. When I was back home, we had a big homeschool group, and there was this one family that I just wanted my children to be like her children. I wanted to teach like her, and I tried to kind of do what it looked like in her homeschool, and it wasn't what our homeschool was supposed to look like. So it will lead to burnout if you're trying to do things that aren't you and aren't true to yourself. And you also have, like what I said, curriculum guilt, because you'll have a lot of stuff that you just don't use and get around to. Okay, the beauty of homeschooling is that you get to tailor your unique family beliefs, values, and priorities. That's why we've chosen to homeschool, is that we can do things in a way that best represents our family and our family's needs. So again, it goes back to the comparison is the thief of joy. We've got to let that go when we're planning our education. Why does determining style help you determine curriculum? Because you're not going to waste money on things. You're not going to experience burnout. And you're actually going to complete the stuff that you have planned out to do if it fits you. And then that goes back to the find your favorite. So let's go through just a couple of those. If you are concerned about keeping lockstep with the local school system, maybe you do have a student that might go back to school, and that's fine. Then you might want to follow a traditional curriculum. Some of those on your sheets are going to be like ABECA or BJU. They're used a lot in school settings because they work well in a school setting, and that's fine. If you don't necessarily want to plan, but you prefer to be spontaneous, do we have any spontaneous people in this group? Raise your hand. That's the unschooling. That's the unschooling. You place great emphasis on having facts memorized. Maybe you are trying to prep your student to take some tests, and they're college bound, and they're going to need to do some facts memorization. That would be your classical or your traditional. You love hands-on projects and activities, and you don't mind spending the time to prepare them. Who likes hands-on projects? When I started out, when my senior, and I still have it, we made these little popsicle like soldiers for the Confederate soldiers, and that we love that. Now I do not have the time and energy to be doing that with my last born. I am a totally different homeschool teacher now than I was when we first started out. So you guys can kind of get the idea. If you go through that list, that'll help you to, when you're researching curriculum, you kind of have an idea of what you want to research. And so based on that information is what you're wanting to put into your searches in order to kind of find things that work for your family. Not letting curriculums cramp your style will provide you with freedom, flexibility, and joy in your homeschooling journey. You're going to build your curriculum around your life. Don't build your life around your curriculum. Okay, so your curriculum is not your slave, it's not your master, it's a tool. When my husband does construction, he uses a hammer, but hammer is not his boss. That's a tool that he uses to get the job done. So there's going to be a lot of different variety of curriculum that you can use to get the job done, to teach your children. But ultimately, what we're wanting to do is, like what you've heard before this morning, is to have a love for learning, and use the resources that's going to foster that in your child. I am going to hand this over to Rebecca because here is the thing. I was asking her last night. We are co-workers. We're sisters in Christ, but we also are mamas just like you, and we all have our struggles. And I was like, Rebecca, I have my 12-year-old just does not live in history. I've tried The Good and the Beautiful. I've tried Knotgrass. I've tried da-da-da-da-da. And she was able to give me some fresh ideas on what to do for history. And so by sharing the subject of history, we've got a couple other counselors that are going to share with you what they've used to kind of make learning come alive again. It gets you thinking about curriculum in a different way and what the definition of curriculum could be.
Absolutely, yeah. So my name is Rebecca, again, hi, and I am a history nerd to the core. You cut me open, you're going to find useless history facts. It's just who I am. And from the time that I was a little girl in elementary school, I always wanted to teach history, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to work in the historical field at various museums and to teach history to homeschool co-ops through the years. And so for me, this is just as natural as breathing, talking about fun ways to engage history. And so who in this room likes history? If you don't, that's okay. Yeah, okay. Who kind of loathes history? Okay, yeah, totally. I get it. I loathe math, so I feel you. Y'all may love math. So for history, I like to kind of take on the coattails of Miss Margie. I'm going to try to set you free when it comes to talking about historical education, because that's something that people tend to struggle with the most outside of that core subjects. They're like, how do I teach history? I don't like it. I don't like to talk about it. I don't understand it. I don't want to do it. So I love experiential-based history lessons. Let's go somewhere. Let's go do something. Let's experience something. Because, okay, so how many of y'all are West Tennessee? Okay, middle, east, no, east. I'm east. I live in Knoxville. And so I'm going to tell you, I've taught Tennessee history for years, and Tennessee is one of the richest historical states in the entire country. Honestly, outside of the original 13 colonies. There is history in Tennessee that goes all the way back to the French and Indian War up until today. Okay, so you cannot toss a stick, especially in West Tennessee, without hitting something that is of historical significance that you can take your kiddos to for them to learn history, and hopefully some may seep into your brain as well, okay? So, battlefields. Tons of battlefields in West Tennessee. You have Parker's Crossroads just right down the interstate. You have Shiloh National Battlefield Park down towards close to Savannah and Corinth, Mississippi. You can go to those. You can. This is actually from my last family vacation a couple weeks ago. You can actually visit these national parks, and some of the state parks do it too, and they have a junior ranger program. Now, anybody can be a junior ranger. There's no age limit, so I continually embarrass my 16-year-old by doing the junior ranger programs. But you just get a little booklet. It's just like this, and there are different activities. There are some activities that are based on the exhibits in the museum, so you're having your kiddo read and comprehend what they're reading, right? And then there are some activities in here that are like ranger-led activities. If they have ranger-led programs, it'll ask you about what the ranger-led program was about. And every book is a little bit different, but once you complete a certain number of activities in this book, your kiddo, or you, can take this to the ranger's office, usually in the visitor center, and turn in, and they have a little swearing in ceremony, and they get a pin. And I have a whole collection of pins, and I'm completely unashamed about it. Now, if you just don't have the time to stay and do all the activities, more often than not, if you pull a ranger aside and say, we're going to finish this, but we just don't have time to finish it today. Could you possibly give me the pins or the patches now, and I'll stow those away, and then when my kids finish them, more often than not, they'll say, oh, sure, and they'll go ahead and give you those pins or patches so that when your kids do complete it, you can, give them that reward at home. But it's not just Junior Ranger. There's always, these maps, these ubiquitous maps when you go to a national park or a national battlefield site. And these maps are great because they're full color, lots of information. Look at all that information. I mean, that's just like a textbook right there. That's a piece of curriculum. Look at that. And there's, always nice color images. If they have a color image, on the back is a map. This is from Appomattox Courthouse. And so it has a whole map of the location and all this little great information about all the buildings. I mean, look at all that you're learning.
And how much was that, Rebecca?
It was free. It was the gas. I mean, gas isn't cheap these days, but we were going through Appomattox anyway.
That sounds a lot better than a curriculum that's sitting on my shelf that I've paid $50
That's right,
for, right?
that's
That I'm
right.
not using, right?
That's exactly right. And there's all kinds. It's not just the maps. There's tons of maps that you can get. Sometimes the state will produce a map. This is from Virginia. This is a Virginia Civil War Trails map. Tennessee has a Civil War Trails map as well. And they're all across the state. They have these little, you ever see these little signs that look like this when you travel down the road? If you see one of those, you can stop. Sometimes they're just by the side of the road. And it has like a little informational plaque, but they have a map that shows you where all of those are. And they're all interconnected with each other. Like this is about the war between the states, the American Civil War. But they have different, Tennessee has a few different trails that they have. Like there's a Moonshiners Trail that goes through eastern Tennessee. Again, it's free, but you can also buy like these little books. We bought these at Appomattox. But these are, this little book is about the Confederate Cemetery at Appomattox. And it was $3? Oh, it was $5. It was $5. But it's so rich. I mean, it's all words. And it's so rich in information. And this was written by somebody local, who's a local expert on that local history on this subject, right? And they've poured a lot of their love into it. Yes, ma'am?
Where did you get that book?
Appomattox and Courthouse. And so, and there's these, my husband bought these. These are myths about Lee's surrender. There's actually 2 books about them, more myths about Lee's surrender. But these are all just examples of, I love these little booklets that are $5 or less. 9 times out of 10, you stop at a historical site, they're going to have some kind of little booklet like this that's just a little bit more information than maybe what's in the traditional visitor's guide, okay? So beyond field trips, which are my favorite, so how do you plan a field trip? People get overwhelmed, right? Like, I don't have time to do these field trips. You can do one a month. The second Friday of the month, we're going to visit somewhere, okay? So we're going to visit Parker's Crossroads, say. So in the week or so leading up to your visit to Parker's Crossroads, you and your kiddo can get online. Let's look up Parker's Crossroads. What happened there? Why is that important? And then try to find out whatever information you can about that site before you go. So when you go, you're an informed visitor, right? So when you're hopefully, when your kiddos go, they'll be comfortable enough to ask questions. So they can ask questions of the rangers. If you go to a reenactment, like a Civil War reenactment, please ask the reenactors questions. I'm a reenactor, my husband's a reenactor. Nothing thrills us more than somebody who asks a question, because there's a lot of love that goes into what is happening at that event. And there's no question that's silly. No question is too simple to be asked. Aren't you hot? That's a question we get a lot. We love to talk about why we're not really that hot, okay? So ask questions. If your kiddo's too shy to ask questions, you should ask some questions to kind of get them involved, okay? So beyond field trips, beyond that, which is my favorite, there's also some other really great resources. Now, I get asked a lot, what history curriculum do you recommend? None of them. I don't like any of them, I'm sad to say. But I do love Usborne books. Usborne's history books are amazing. And if you're familiar with Usborne books, they all have these internet links, websites that you can go to that connect with the information that's included. So I love Usborne's history books. That's the closest I've ever come to recommending a curriculum. And those are fairly inexpensive. A lot of times you can find those at used curriculum bookstores and yard sales and stuff as well if you don't want to necessarily buy them new. I also love Horrible Histories. Has anybody ever heard of Horrible Histories? It's on Hulu, if you have Hulu. It's also on YouTube. But it's a British children's television show, but they talk about history and how horrible history is. And it's very funny. There's lots of potty humor, so boys particularly love it. But there's lots of songs, and the host is a rat. And they just talk about the weird, quirky things that happen in history. Now, I'm not particularly crazy about their American history productions, but if it's British history or world history or ancient history, Horrible Histories is amazing, and it's so fun, and they make songs, and my daughter sings the songs about Henry VIII. When she was 9, she knew all the names of Henry VIII's wives and how they died because there's a song from Horrible Histories, and she would go around the house singing it.
Is this like enlightening you guys to the definition of curriculum? Like, just by hearing her talk, like, I don't like history. I want to do all of these things because she's passionate about history. Yeah. And so that's what we're wanting to, like, get you to take that word curriculum and think of it in a little bit different way.
Yeah. So as your kiddos get older, of course, things will change. Now, I still watch Horrible Histories, and I'm in my 40s, so there's no age limit on that. But, of course, as they get older and a little bit more mature, their activities, historical-based activities, can, of course, mature accordingly. Reenacting is a great way to keep your child out of mischief because they're going to spend all their money on that stuff, and they're not going to have time or money to spend it anywhere else. But when they get older, we're talking about civics education, learning about government and how government works. There's so many wonderful opportunities, especially for teenage kids, to learn those things hands-on. So they can help with elections. A lot of times local election staff are looking for volunteers to work on election night to see how election tallies are reported and to potentially participate. When I was in high school, I was a reporter, so the voting staff would give us statistics from a certain machine, and we would actually call, I don't know if they do this, how they do this now, this is ancient, but we would actually call a phone number, a national reporting phone number, and report those numbers I think it was mostly for media purposes. But they can get involved in local voting elections. I think once they're 16, they can actually work as a poll worker. In most places in Tennessee. And you could go along too. Y'all could do it together to take your child along when you go to vote. My daughter has voted in every election that I've ever voted in. She goes along with me. We go through the whole process. Now we're back to circling in circles, but she's used the machines. My parents did that with me. So when I turned 18, it was never a question for me that I was going to vote because that precedent had been set so consistently for me. There are also really formal programs that students can participate in. There's one called Teen Pact. Actually, Lacey's son and my daughter went to Teen Pact, to the same Teen Pact last year. And that's an incredible program. It teaches, I think it's 13 or 14. 14
to start, yeah.
Yeah, 14-year-olds.
They have a 12-year-old program too, I think, the one-day class.
Yeah, through 19-year-olds. So they have like a multi-day program for the older students, and then they have a one-day program for students as young as maybe 11 or 12. And it's teaching students about government, how government works, what your responsibility as a citizen is within our governmental system. In Tennessee, of course, they talk about how Tennessee works governmentally, because every state can be a little different as to how they do that. And it's an incredible program. My daughter was a very reluctant attendee because she is not a huge nerd like I am. But she went and she really enjoyed the experience, and she learned a lot, and she gained a lot from that. And she came away from it a much more informed young woman. And so, even when it comes to subjects such as history or civics or U.S. government, you can completely embrace a pretty, what might be considered, I guess, non-traditional or interest-led study of those subjects, and probably your students are going to walk away from it a lot more informed. I just want to mention one more thing is, two more things. Local officials, call up your local mayor's office and say, hey, can my kiddo come shadow you in your office one day? I mean, the worst thing they can say is no, right? Maybe if it's not them, maybe another county official might be willing to have your student come into their office for the day to learn about what that department does. And family genealogy, that's a really big trend right now. Genealogy is really popular, studying your family's history. And so that's something my daughter is particularly interested in right now. It just kind of popped in out of the blue. She's really interested in doing that research herself, learning how to research, learning how to comprehend what she's reading, translating that into what could be useful tidbits of information for the rest of the family. And so that's something that she's really into, and there's something that goes hand in hand in that is visiting cemeteries. I love a good old cemetery. I mean, just give it to me. I'm so happy. And so that's something else that really ties in with the genealogy, of course, is visiting old cemeteries and talking about what the symbology on the tombstones mean, and the importance of that, and how that plays into our culture, particularly here in the South, but just also as a family.
And Rebecca,
there's so
I
many
have a question.
opportunities.
You guys might be thinking, that sounds great for a child that you don't have to worry about a high school transcript.
Yeah.
Can we put all of that stuff
Oh,
on a
absolutely.
transcript? And how do we count hours, and how do we give grades?
Absolutely. So I actually work with graduating seniors. That's one of my primary roles here at HomeLife Academy. And so we are so happy to help you cultivate course titles that reflect what your student needs to graduate. So if you're wanting your kid to go to a 4-year college or a 2-year college that will need an official transcript, we can absolutely make those course titles fit into a box, right, on paper. But that doesn't mean it has to be in a box in life, okay? So we can work our magic and work with you, and sometimes it requires a phone conversation, which we're always happy to have. And we have lots of non-traditional families who have gone through most of their homeschool journey, especially the high school years, being pretty non-traditional, and those kids have gone on to prestigious universities or local community colleges. Like, one is not necessarily better than the other, right? It's each child's path. So we can absolutely make those things look as traditional as they need to be. Now, how do you assess a student? Are they learning? Are they growing? Are they thriving? Are they understanding? Are they meeting kind of what you all talked about as a family, especially for older kids, right? You want to involve your kiddo in those decisions that are being made, so that if they start complaining, you can say, well, you helped choose this. So it's partly your fault. No. That's how you assess. If they're growing, they're thriving, they're understanding, that's an A, right? If they're not, well, maybe not. And so for credit-wise, if you want to get technically it's about 150 hours is a full credit. If you're going like spring or fall, spring, that'd be like fall semester and spring semester typically. Now we do have some families that do like what they call block scheduling, where they kind of like concentrate on maybe 2 or 3 courses the fall semester, and then they really concentrate on other courses spring semester. They could achieve a full credit if you did that as well. So if you have questions about that, you can definitely reach out, and we're happy to talk with you about credit assignment. But I promise it's not as big scary beast as it might feel like when you're starting high school. High school is so fun, and it's the most rewarding part of homeschooling is going through the high school years. even when you have a cantankerous 16-year-old who has attitude to spare. But that came from me, so, who am I going to blame?
It's character training, right?
That's right, that's right.
So my friend Jennifer, I was talking to her yesterday. We've been at a counselor retreat all weekend, and there was a butterfly in our picnic area, and she popped up, and she that's a da-da-da-da-da. I'm not even sure what it was, and I was like, and she said, I know that because when my sons were growing up, that's how we educated. They were dyslexic, correct, and they had some trouble with reading, and so they would just go out and they would do they would identify the butterflies. She's going to talk more about that. So I just thought that was so cool because we learn along with our children, and all these years later, you were able to identify that butterfly. And she what also that I thought was interesting was how she's going to talk about a little bit about how she used classical education for a student that didn't necessarily fit the classical mode, but it worked out really well. So.
Okay. Well, yes. So my name's Jennifer Post, and I started with 5 boys. My oldest was very traditional, but all of them are artists, musicians, or athletes. None of them fit the traditional, I will sit at a desk with a book and a pencil mold. They won't do it, none of them. So I loved reading about curriculum and their style, how the process worked, what they did to complete the assignments. So in my experience with all the different flavors of homeschooling, I really pulled information from everything, because I found that everything had benefits that I could use as a tool. It's about don't let them control you. They're your tool. You use them. And so the traditional, yes, sometimes we had some workbooks type things that will help keep us on track, but I didn't have to use the workbook to teach the information. So we could check off the boxes, in different subjects. Some subjects you kind of need that checklist to make sure you're getting through all of the right topics and got everything covered. But I was the human audiobook for all my non-reading children. So there are curriculum out there with audiobook, which are great. I kind of tended toward them, but especially when they were young, say for science, so they're not going to read a science book, and they're boys, so they want to be outside, and we need to be moving at all times. And we need to be in a project at all times. I had one child who set my yard on fire several times doing science experiments that he watched on YouTube. So I would walk outside and say, oh, my yard's on fire. But so we would use a science curriculum, and it would have a subject matter. So butterflies. I know more about insects than I ever cared to know. I do not like bugs. But it would have butterflies. So we would find methods I found how to grow butterflies. And we would have jars of caterpillars. And we put the sticks and the appropriate weed or plant in them there for them to eat. I told Lacey that I went to the grocery store and came home with bunches of parsley for my the swallowtail butterflies, black swallowtails, eat lots of parsley. So they would ask me at the checkout line.
With how much parsley they had.
So they were like, what are you using all this parsley for? And I said, to feed my caterpillars. And they're like, what? So I never thought I'd be buying parsley to feed caterpillars. But then we had to read, and I read out loud, this is and the kids did it. They had to put the sticks in. They have to have a certain size stick for them to attach their chrysalis to. And so I did lots of reading out loud. They did the work. They took pictures and documented the whole thing, and they made a book. They pasted their pictures in and wrote the stages. It was really fun. And yes, now I know more about butterflies than I ever wanted to know. We had the Audubon pocket guides, and when it got to when we were outside, they would see a butterfly, and they would start chasing it, and then we would go home and look it up in the Audubon guide. What did we see? Oh, that's the one we saw. And so I would read it to them. So, there's just so many great ways. And those are my best memories. Some of my very, very best memories. But, so I used the classical model. Now, my boys and my daughter, she's athlete and artist too. She's not the same. She's just like her brothers. They're not the classical mold. You think of it as a very rigorous program, but my second son at 13 still could not read a 3-letter word after 6 different reading programs. I discovered dyslexia. So we found out that, and I said, how am I going to educate him at 13 and up when we have to go back and start reading instruction again from the beginning? And then he has 4 younger siblings, and how am I going to educate all them when I'm trying to teach my 13-year-old to read? And a friend of mine talked to me about classical conversations. The only reason I did it is because, now remember, I have athletes, musicians, and artists, okay? So through 12 years old, or 13, they sing everything. And I went, oh, auditory learners and musicians, and they sing everything. So the reason I did classical conversations is because as I'm teaching the young ones to read and the 13-year-old to read again, we're working on the classical conversations curriculum because they're singing all their information, and they can still to this day, my 28-year-old, my 25-year-old, they can sing all those songs, and I'm like, y'all will never forget this. Like all the dates, and I wasn't good at history because I could never attach the date, the event, and the person. Like I could never remember them all together. Well, they remember all of them because you have the event, the person, and the date all in a song. And what I did learn was that, first of all, you have the short-term memory. And for a while, you have to sing it to remember it. But over the years, it transfers to your long-term memory. And now they can say it all without the music in the background. But the music created a pattern for them to remember the information. So it was a great tool. I didn't stick with it. They got into challenge in the high school, and it was mutiny. We're going to run away from home if you don't take us out of this. So we stopped, and we had to find a different method of doing that. When we got into high school, and say did some co-ops, and I had to go up and tell the co-op they cannot take their tests, or one particular, but they cannot take their test in the class with you. I need you to give me the test, and I need to read the test questions out loud because they will give you the wrong answer if they have to write it, because there was no comprehension between what they knew in their head and being able to write it on paper. So he could tell me the answer, and I could dictate. I became the dictator at that point. So, but there's lots of ways to use all of these. They all have great ideas of tools that can be used to use for your education. You don't have to, so you could use the curriculum as a guideline, as a skeleton, kind of kept me on track, especially with all the different ones and all the different things. The Charlotte Mason, they do lots of nature study, which is where we got the butterfly idea. When we would talk about leaves with the Audubon pocket guides, we would go find the leaves, and then they would do crayon rubbings or chalk rubbings of the leaves, and they would write on the bottom what kind of tree that was. And they would make a book to put their pictures in. They did the rubbing. So everything had to become very hands-on, but each of these flavors gave me great ideas to use as tools to be able to communicate that information in a way that they would internalize it and remember it. And they still remember all that stuff they learned when they were little, because it was presented in a way that they could understand it and remember it.
So that sounds fantastic. I've heard about history. I've heard a little bit how we can do science and maybe some of the memorization. But what about math? That's scary. Do we have to use a traditional textbook for math, Donna?
Okay, so I'm here to talk about the scariest subject of all, and that is home math.
So can you hear me, Joseph? Do I need this? You can stand by me. Okay. Okay, so math is the scariest subject of all. How many of you are doing elementary? How many in here's got elementary kids? Okay. Any junior high or high school? Okay, so let's start off with elementary here. If you're teaching elementary math, once again, we are not curriculum, just go by this math curriculum, that's not it. My suggestion for kindergarten through 3rd grade math, if you want to stay with standards or what they need to learn, find you a book that has a spine. Spectrum is a great workbook that has a really good spine. You don't have to do the workbook. Get out beans and M&Ms and pine cones and sticks and tractors and whatever else you can find to count and label and use. A lot of times for that age group also, math is really good to be taught in the home. Sort the laundry, sort the utensils, just count the steps. I mean, there's just so many things that you can use to teach math at this age without buying this curriculum. Like kids really, they love flashcards, but flashcards can be used by, 1 + 1. Okay, take 2 steps, do 2 jumping jacks. I mean, anything that you can think of where your kids are still active in learning math and make math fun. Sometimes they do have to, you do have to learn facts. I mean, there are some times that you can learn, that you need to learn facts. I am a math brain. God gave me a gift. You give me a problem, I can solve it. I just have it. It's nothing that I've cultivated, learned. I've always had a math brain. None of my kids like math. Not one out of 5 of them. Not one like math. None of them. And so I had to really think about, why are you not just grasping this? Because I just grasped it. It was just there for me. I knew all my timetables before I was in 2nd grade, and it just came to me. So I didn't understand what. So I had to learn how my kids like math, and I had to make it fun for them. If you have a child who struggles in math, just give them the essentials. I think Miss Margie taught in the last class. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, divisions, fractions, decimals. That's the 6 things that we pretty much, all we need to know to make it through most of our adult life. Now, if you're doing engineering or, some sort of computer thing or things like that, you need higher level maths. But most of the time, you only need those 6 things. So if your kids master those by the time they're in high school, that's super great. It really, really is. And if they can master them by 8th grade, it's great too. There's lots of curriculum out there. There's Math Essentials, which is really good, that teaches the basics. There's SACs in math. But like they said, there is no perfect curriculum. Okay, but you have to get them engaged in math. Unit studies are a good way to engage in math. We were talking about butterflies. How many butterflies does this one lay? How many eggs does this one lay? And graph it. I mean, that's part of your unit study in there. So anytime you're doing a unit study, put math in there too, any way that you can. You can add up how many each butterfly you saw in a day, or when you're in a creek somewhere, how many rocks are black and how many are white, and make a graph of it. I kept, anytime we went on field trips or anything like that, my kids always carried a journal, so we could do a quick math problem or something, or we could graph something really quick. So my main thing with kids with math is, don't make it scary. If it becomes scary for you, it's going to be scary for them. And if all points that you need help, you need to reach out to someone to help you with that math, do that. So that, because I get so many kids that I'm tutoring and stuff, it's been so scary for them for so many years that they have this mental block of math. And I see it more in girls than boys. And so anytime that you start seeing your kids come up against a wall like that, really take the time to say, hey, step back, what can we do? If they go through a curriculum, if you are using a curriculum, or you're looking at standards, or you have a spine or whatever you're using, and they're not meeting those, say you have a 3rd grader that's in 3rd grade math, okay, and he's not meeting, use something else. Keep the 3rd grade curriculum, but just use a different curriculum, or go through and just make up your own, do the things that you need to do. If they're not getting division, just work on division for a month or 2 until, use different ways. Manipulatives are great. Always have math manipulatives. A calculator is not a bad thing this day and time. Our generation, our parents said, you need to know this. You won't be able to carry a calculator in your pocket, around in your pocket. Well, we proved them wrong, and we do. And so calculators are not bad, y'all. They really are. They're a tool now. My son is dyslexic, has dysgraphia, and he was the 5th one. The rest of them were girls, then I got the one boy. I'm glad I only had one boy. And he has dysgraphia, but he worked with a concrete guy, and I was going to show him how to do linear yardage so that he could do, get concrete, how much concrete he needed. And he whipped out his phone and said, I have an app for that. I'm like, okay. So yeah, so don't let math be scary for your kids. That's the biggest thing that I just want to tell you, that if it scares you, get some, reach out for help. What can I do? Look at all the options, see what you can do. Don't let it be textbook. They don't need to do 50 division problems every day. If they have the concept and they do 3, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Just relax about math and enjoy it, because it really is. And you'll have some that really are really good at math and they'll do fine. And if others don't, it's like, you have some readers and some don't. So just make it fun. That's the biggest thing, especially in the younger grades.
Donna is one of our tutorial teachers at HomeLife Learning. So I hope that's given you guys just a taste of a way to look at curriculum in a little bit different way. We don't have to spend a ton of money on it. It's okay if curriculum is your comfort zone. I personally feel like it's Christmas time when I'm getting an order of curriculum. But just don't let it be your boss. Don't be a slave to the curriculum. Think outside the box on some of the subjects, and then if some of the subjects fit more in that traditional, then that's awesome. Are we done? All right, thank you guys.